My name is Michael Carter. I'm 45 years old, and 6 months ago I discovered that the woman I had shared my bed with for 2 decades wasn't just cheating on me, she was financing another man's luxury life with the money meant for the future of our only daughter. You see, there's a very clear difference between a wounded, impulsive man and a wounded man who knows how to wait. While she believed I was the idiot working 12 hours a day to support her whims, I was sitting in the shadows, watching every single dollar from my daughter's college savings disappear into cheap motels and casino accounts. My wife didn't just betray me, she betrayed the only sacred thing we had. And at that exact moment, when I saw the account balance drop to 0, I stopped being her husband and became her financial executioner. Justice isn't always fast, but when it's planned with a cold mind, it's devastating. She thought she would get away with it because I was always the quiet one, the man who never raised his voice. She was wrong. Silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Today I'm going to tell you how I recovered every single dollar and how I made sure she and her lover ended up exactly where they deserved to be, in absolute ruin. If you enjoy stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, leave a like and subscribe. Here, we share real stories of revenge and lessons that are never forgotten. For 18 years, my life was an exercise in discipline and predictability. I consider myself a man of method. My routine started at 5 in the morning and ended long after the sun went down. My goal was simple: to make sure my daughter, Sophia, never lacked what I never had. Amanda, my wife, was always the friendly face of our home. She handled the household logistics while I took care of the financial engineering of our family. I worked in risk consulting for years, a job that teaches you to read numbers before you read people. Numbers don't lie, they don't have emotions, and above all, they don't betray you if you know how to interpret them. To anyone looking from the outside, our relationship was a complete success. We lived in a large house free from suffocating debt and shared Sunday dinners that looked like they came straight out of a happiness catalogue. I trusted her. That's the trap men fall into when we believe in the value of someone's word. I gave her full access to our accounts, not out of laziness, but because I believed in the partnership we had built. She managed the fund we created for Sophia from the day she was born. It was a sacred fund. Every Christmas bonus, every raise, and every extra dollar went straight into that investment account. The plan was for Sophia to attend the best university without carrying student loans for the rest of her life. That was my legacy. Amanda had always been an elegant woman, but over the last 2 years something changed. She became obsessively concerned with her appearance. Expensive cosmetic treatments, designer clothes that appeared in the closet with the excuse of being on sale, and constant trips with friends I never quite got to know. In my ignorance, or maybe my exhaustion, I saw it as a phase. I told myself that at 42 she just wanted to feel young again. I convinced myself she deserved it after running the household for so long. Even when sex became mechanical, almost a mandatory transaction once a month, I stayed. A real man doesn't abandon the ship when the sea gets a little rough, or at least that's what my father taught me. The atmosphere at home began to feel cold. There were no more conversations about the future, only logistical exchanges. Did you pay the electric bill? What time is Sophia getting home? She spent hours glued to her phone, wearing a smile that wasn't meant for me. I watched her from across the room, pretending to read reports. But really I was logging every small change. The way she hid the screen when I walked behind her. The habit of showering immediately after coming back from her supposed coffee outings. These are signs you ignore to protect your own peace of mind. But peace of mind is a luxury betrayed men can't afford for very long. I wasn't a jealous man. I never was. But I have an instinct for inconsistencies. I'm a risk analyst after all. I started noticing that Amanda no longer complained about the budget. Before, she always asked for more money for this or that, but suddenly she seemed to have an endless cash flow. My mistake was thinking she had become more efficient with household expenses. How stupid I was. In reality, she was draining the lifeblood of our family to feed a parasite. Emotionally, the house existed in a tense calm. Sophia was in her senior year of high school, excited, browsing university brochures, making plans to move out and start her adult life. I felt proud. I felt like my mission was almost complete. Just a couple more years of hard work and then I could rest. Amanda, meanwhile, looked more radiant than ever, but her eyes no longer looked at me. They looked at me the way you look at an old piece of furniture that no longer matches the decor, but is too useful to throw away. I remember one specific night. We were having dinner, and Sophia mentioned how happy she was that she wouldn't have to worry about tuition costs thanks to her fund. Amanda went pale for a second, just a blink, then forced a smile. She drained her glass of wine in one gulp and quickly changed the subject. That was the first loose thread. My analytical mind couldn't let it go. That night, while she slept deeply, with the peace only sociopaths or the deeply cynical possess, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Something didn't add up. The balance I had built so carefully felt fragile, as if the ground beneath my feet were made of paper. I could have been any of you, a man who shows up, who provides, who loves in silence, and who believes loyalty is a mutual contract. But for some people, loyalty is just a word they use while they search for something better or more exciting. I was about to discover that my reality was built on lies, and that the money meant to secure my daughter's future was being used to rent the masculinity of a man who didn't have half my age or a tenth of my dignity. That night was the last night of my former life. The man who woke up the next morning was no longer the providing husband. He was a cold observer, waiting for the moment to confirm his suspicions. The confirmation came in the coldest way possible, a forgotten account statement sitting in the recycle bin of our shared computer. Amanda had always been careful, but overconfidence is the first step toward the abyss. When I opened the file, my heart didn't race. On the contrary, it turned to ice. Sophia's college fund, which should have held close to $80,000, showed a balance of barely $300. The withdrawals had been constant, small, and methodical over the past 18 months. Direct transfers to an external account I didn't recognize. That afternoon, I decided not to confront her. A smart man doesn't show his cards too early. Instead, I installed tracking software on her phone and hired a private investigator. What I discovered in the days that followed was a humiliation no man should ever have to endure. She wasn't just spending the money. She was supporting a 25-year-old guy, a gym instructor with delusions of being a model, living in an apartment paid for by her, driving a car whose monthly payments came from my labor, and wearing clothes that I was indirectly buying for him. I saw her through the investigator's photos. She smiled with a freedom she had never shown with me. She touched him openly in public, handed him envelopes full of cash, and looked at him with a devotion that made my stomach turn. Meanwhile, at home, she kept complaining about how tired she was and how money was barely enough because of inflation. The cynicism was absolute. The woman sleeping next to me every night was a stranger, a thief stealing her own child's future to buy the affection of a second-rate gigolo. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I told her I'd be working late, but instead I parked 2 blocks away from a luxury hotel on the outskirts of town. I watched her arrive in her SUV. He was already waiting for her at the entrance. They kissed without the slightest hint of shame. She pulled a watch out of her purse, one I recognized instantly. It was a limited edition watch I had mentioned wanting to buy for my birthday. She had bought it, just not for me. She strapped it onto his wrist while they laughed. I felt a deep wave of nausea, not from sadness but from disgust. The man I had been died in that car. What remained was a cold, unshakable determination. That night, when she came home, Amanda sat at the table and asked how my day had been. She looked me straight in the eyes with a terrifying sense of normalcy. She touched my hand and said Sophia needed extra money for some prep courses. She asked me to transfer another $5,000 into the college fund account because the investments were down. I stared at her. My silence lasted longer than usual. She didn't blink. In that moment, I understood there was no soul behind those eyes, only convenience. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll make the transfer tomorrow." She smiled, leaned in, and kissed my cheek, carrying the scent of another man's cologne. I went to my study. I didn't cry. Men like me don't cry over traitors. We calculate damages. I reviewed state laws on marital property and the misappropriation of family funds. She believed the money in that account, since it was under her name as administrator, was hers to use freely. What she didn't know was that I had kept every single proof of origin for those funds, showing they were savings exclusively designated for our daughter's education under a trust she had illegally altered. The final humiliation came later that same night, when Sophia walked into the study, excited, holding the acceptance letter from her dream university. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Dad, thank you for working so hard for this," she said, hugging me. I felt the world collapse on my shoulders. My daughter had no idea her mother had left her with nothing for a man who could barely spell his own name. I forced a smile, while inside I swore Amanda would pay for every single cent with her own skin. Betraying a husband is one thing, but stripping your own child of her future for lust is a sin that has no forgiveness in my world. The next day, Amanda asked me to leave the house for a few hours because some repairs were supposedly scheduled. It was a lie. She was going to meet him again. Once she left, I packed her most expensive belongings into black trash bags. I didn't throw them onto the street. That would be crude. I placed them in a storage unit I had already rented. I changed the locks on the house and installed a security camera at the entrance. But that was only the symbolic beginning. The real eviction wouldn't be from the house, but from the life of privilege she believed was guaranteed. Removing her from her comfort zone was still in its preparation phase. I sat alone on the couch in a house that suddenly felt massive and empty, waiting for the lawyer to return my call. The war had officially begun. The plan wasn't born out of rage, but out of precision. As a risk consultant, my job has always been to identify a system's vulnerabilities and exploit them to protect capital. In this case, the system was my marriage, and the capital was my daughter's future. The first thing I did was contact an old college colleague, a lawyer specializing in financial fraud and high-profile divorces. We met in a windowless office, far from familiar eyes. I laid out the trail of breadcrumbs Amanda had left behind. The transfers from Sophia's account, credit card charges at men's stores I had never shopped at, and the private investigator's records. My lawyer looked at me with a mix of pity and respect. He explained that legally she had committed the misappropriation of funds from an educational trust, something that, in our jurisdiction, carries serious criminal consequences if intent to defraud is proven. But I didn't just want her to go to jail. I wanted her to feel the same insecurity she had inflicted on our daughter. I wanted her to watch her house of cards collapse without being able to do anything to stop it. "Michael," my lawyer said, "we can take the fast route and get divorced, or we can play the long game and leave her with nothing, without even the possibility of spousal support." "Choose the long game," I replied without hesitation. My rebuilding began by protecting my assets. Over the next 2 months, I pretended everything was normal. It was the hardest performance of my life. I had dinner with her, listened to her lies about shopping afternoons, and sometimes even allowed her to kiss me while I felt a repulsion burning inside my chest. Meanwhile, I moved every dollar from my personal accounts into protected accounts and changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance policies. Thanks to my contacts in the financial world, I also managed to get the bank to issue an internal audit on Sophia's account. I discovered something even better. The lover, that guy named Diego, had a history of minor fraud. Amanda wasn't just in love. She was being scammed by a professional. She handed him money for supposed real estate investments that didn't exist. One night, sitting in front of my computer, I smiled for the first time in weeks. She was stealing from her daughter to give money to a man who was stealing from her. The circle of betrayal was perfect. I decided to use that to my advantage. Through a third party, I made sure Diego received an investment opportunity that was too good to be true. It required a strong initial capital, exactly the amount still sitting in a joint savings account Amanda hadn't touched yet. Just as I expected, she couldn't resist the temptation. She thought that if she invested that money and made a profit, she could replenish Sophia's fund before I ever noticed. She put the noose around her own neck. The money she invested ended up in an account controlled by a shell company my lawyer and I had legally created to recover the misappropriated funds. I was getting my own money back by using her greed as bait. I stayed calm. My patience was endless. I watched her grow anxious when the returns from her investment never came. I saw her whispering on the phone, desperate, while the lover started ignoring her calls because he had already drained her for everything he could. I became her silent shadow. One day, while she was crying in the kitchen, thinking I couldn't see her, I walked over and asked if everything was okay. "Yes, it's just stress over Sophia's college expenses," she lied, wiping her tears with the hand that still wore the wedding ring I had given her. "Don't worry, Amanda," I said, patting her shoulder. "Everything is going to work out very soon, in a way you can't even imagine." At that moment, my legal team already had the divorce filing ready, the criminal fraud complaint prepared, and a restraining order based on the evidence that she was squandering family assets. But the final blow wouldn't be legal. It would be social and emotional. I made sure all our mutual friends, and most importantly her parents, who had always held me in high regard, received an anonymous dossier with photos and proof of her spending. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. I had to sit Sophia down and explain that the money for her university had hit a setback, but that I would fix it. I didn't tell her the full truth at that moment to protect her, but I swore she would attend that university no matter the cost. Seeing the worry on her face was the final fuel I needed to execute the climax of my plan. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I was looking for a total liquidation of Amanda's presence in our lives. I was ready for the final act. On the day of the climax, there were no screams or soap opera theatrics. Everything unfolded with the precision of a Swiss watch. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Amanda was at home, probably planning how to explain the disappearance of the last $10,000 she had handed to her lover. I arrived earlier than usual, accompanied by my lawyer and 2 court officers. She was in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, her gaze distant. When she saw us walk in, her expression shifted from confusion to panic in a matter of seconds. I didn't give her time to react. My lawyer handed her the divorce filing and simultaneously the criminal complaint for the misappropriation of funds from a trust. "What is this, Michael?" she asked, her voice trembling as she tried to keep her mask of innocence in place. "Is this a joke?" "This isn't a joke, Amanda. It's the account statement of the life you tried to steal from us," I replied, keeping my voice low and cold. I showed her the photos of her with Diego, the hotel receipts, and most importantly the digital trail of every transfer she had made from Sophia's account. She ran out of air. She collapsed onto the couch, dropping the wine glass onto the white carpet. The red liquid spread like a bloodstain, a perfect symbol of what she had done to our family. "I can explain. He tricked me, Michael. He forced me," she sobbed, falling back on the old victim routine. "No one forced you to drain your daughter's future, Amanda. You did it willingly. And now you're leaving this house." At that moment, my lawyer informed her that due to the nature of the financial fraud and the origin of the funds used to purchase the house, we had obtained an immediate eviction order. Her suitcases, the ones I had packed weeks earlier, were already at the door, but that wasn't the final blow. As she cried, the house phone rang. It was Diego. I put the call on speaker. "Amanda, I need more money," the guy said, his voice arrogant and rushed. "The deal fell through, and if you don't pay now, they're going to take my car." I looked at Amanda. She was frozen. "Diego," I said, cutting into the call. "This is Michael. The money is gone. And by the way, the investment Amanda made last month, that money returned to my account 3 days ago. Thanks for being the perfect bait." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line before he hung up. Amanda looked at me with pure hatred. In that instant, she understood that she hadn't just lost me and her status. She had lost the man she betrayed everything for, the moment he realized she was no longer his personal ATM. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, finally losing control. "I'm the mother of your daughter." "That's your greatest sin," I said, stepping close enough for her to see the emptiness in my eyes. "A mother protects. You prayed." The officers escorted her out. I didn't allow her to take anything beyond her basic belongings. Her luxury jewelry, her designer handbags bought with Sophia's money, stayed behind to be liquidated and returned to the college fund. I watched her standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by black trash bags as neighbors began peeking through their windows. The humiliation was total. The woman who felt superior, who believed she could play me, was now alone, broke, and facing criminal charges. That same night, I made sure the lover received a visit from my lawyers. There was no physical violence, it wasn't necessary. We simply informed him that if he ever approached my family again or attempted to contact Amanda, we would file the evidence of his previous scams we had collected. He disappeared from the city before dawn. I stayed in the living room, in silence, staring at the wine stain on the carpet. I felt a bitter satisfaction. Not the joy of winning, but the calm of having done what was right. I recovered nearly 70% of the misappropriated money through the retrieval of the fake investment and the sale of Amanda's luxuries. I would cover the rest with my work, but the lesson was delivered. Moral justice is a dish served with the cold precision of a balance sheet. Amanda thought I was just the man who provided. She never imagined I was the man who could take away everything she believed she owned. 6 months have passed since the doors of this house closed behind Amanda forever. The legal process was relentless, exactly as I planned. She tried to appeal, tried to reach me through third parties, and even attempted to send messages filled with a false remorse that didn't convince even her own lawyer. But when you destroy the future of your own flesh and blood, forgiveness is not an option on the table. Not for a man like me. Today, Sophia is in her first semester of college. It wasn't easy. We had painful conversations. There were tears, and a healing process that is still ongoing. She knows the truth, or at least the part she needs to know to understand why her mother is no longer present. My daughter is strong. She inherited my determination, but thankfully not the coldness I had to develop to survive this. The college fund has been restored. I didn't just recover what Amanda spent. After liquidating her personal assets and winning the damages lawsuit, the balance is now even higher than it was originally. That is the price of betrayal. As for Amanda, the last I heard, she was living in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town, working a sales job she hates and dealing with legal debt that will follow her for years. Her lover, as expected, cut her out of his life the moment the cash flow stopped. She traded a 20-year legacy for a few months of cheap attention, and now she has a lifetime to reflect on that exchange. I don't feel pity. I feel the peace of someone who has put every piece back where it belongs. Many men in my position would have exploded in anger, broken things, or fallen into deep depression. I chose the path of the strategist. Rage is a fire that consumes you from the inside, but rational justice is a tool that builds a wall between you and those who seek to destroy you. I learned that trust is not a blank check, but a contract that must be constantly audited. I also learned that my greatest pride is not my bank account, but my ability to look my daughter in the eyes and know I kept my promise to protect her, even from her own mother. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts while you move forward, with a cool head and a clean conscience. Time doesn't heal wounds. Time simply proves right those who knew how to wait. My story ends here, but my life truly began the day I decided I would no longer be just another victim. If this story felt as intense to you as it was for me to live it, leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on the bell so you don't miss the next stories.